Assalamu alaikum. Uh, my name is Dalia Mugahed, and I direct research at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. I'm really happy to share with you some of our research, and we're very proud to be able to partner with ISNA on this webinar. Today, I want to share some reflections with you about the importance of the mosque and the importance of making a mosque as welcoming and as inclusive as possible so that everyone, every single believer, feels like it's a place they belong. You know, right now we are in a very unprecedented moment in our history where we actually can't access the mosque. The mosque is closed around the world. Mosques are closed around the world. And so it's a time to reevaluate what kind of a mosque, what kind of a Muslim space do we want to come back to when the doors reopen. It's a perfect time to take a step back and to form committees, actually, to form a task force to ask that question. We now have this pause, especially with Ramadan coming, to really ask this question that we may have never had the time for because we were so busy with just figuring out mosque operations. And not to say that mosque leaders are free now. I know that there's so much work to do, even with the mosque closed, and especially with the mosque closed, trying to engage the community and raise money to keep the mosque moving and the lights on and people and the staff paid. But it's also a moment of incubation. We can think of this quarantine time as a time of transformation, a time of incubation to decide how we want to be when the doors reopen in the future. And so I wanted to share some of my thoughts and also some of ISPU's research on this very question, how to make mosques the most welcoming, the most inclusive that they can be. We conducted a project called Reimagining Muslim Spaces. And this was done in partnership with ISNA and many other organizations, where we wanted to come out with evidence-based recommendations on how to create a welcoming mosque for all. Just to give you a little bit of background before I jump in about ISPU, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding has a very simple mission. It provides objective research and education about American Muslims to support well-informed dialogue and decision-making. Our mission is to make sure that any conversation and any decision involving American Muslims is well informed. And we do that by accomplishing three things. We actually do rigorous academic research on American Muslims. We educate, we educate the public, and we equip. We do in-depth workshops and trainings for change makers to accomplish this goal of making every conversation and every decision well informed. Now, why do mosques matter? Why should we actually invest in making the mosque a place where everyone feels welcomed? And the reason I even ask this question, it might seem completely obvious. Of course, there's so many spiritual benefits of being a part of a communal spiritual experience, of going to the mosque for salah. But a lot of people have, you know, in recent times, especially, I've noticed this idea of a hyper-individualized Islam, where folks think that they can be perfectly fine not being a part of a community, not engaging in communal prayer. And so there's this, there's a movement almost of, quote, the unmosqued. Now, some people are, quote, unmosqued because they don't feel welcomed. Others just don't feel the need for it. And so here I'm making a case for why the mosque matters. First, because it's good for your mental health and it's good for your civic engagement. Frequent mosque attendance, according to our research, is linked to more volunteerism, better mental health, being less likely to be angry, less likely to be sad if you go to a mosque, if you frequent a mosque at least once a week. And it's also linked to higher civic engagement. So people who frequent the mosque more often are much more likely to be registered to vote and to participate in elections and to contact their elected official. So mosques are good for society, even outside of the very important spiritual aspects. Yet at the same time, mosques often are alienating to a lot of people, especially women, converts, and young people. So what we set out to do at ISPU is to figure this out, is to how to ask the question, how can mosques be more inclusive and welcoming to everyone, and also to women, converts, and young people. So some of the challenges that mosques face is that many young adults, women, converts feel alienated, feel like they don't belong in the mosque. At the same time, mosque leaders complain about a lack of volunteerism and a lack of involvement and a lack of commitment to the mosque. And then mosque attendees complain about a lack of unity, the lack of sense of belonging, even if they are still continuing to go. So why should you make your mosque welcoming? If you're a mosque leader watching this, why should you invest time in creating a task force during the quarantine, a virtual task force to think about what you want to do differently when the mosque opens? Why is making mosques welcoming good for the mosque itself and for its leadership? Because when you make your mosque more welcoming, you are going to increase volunteers. You're going to have more sustainable donors. You're going to increase the mosque cleanliness even. It's going to increase spiritual engagement in the mosque. It's going to promote a stronger, more vibrant community. It's also going to build the mosque as a hub for hope, because it's going to foster projects and ideas to help society at large. It's going to provide sanctuaries of support in a hostile environment, the hostile environment that we often find ourselves living in this political climate. And it also grows the next generation of Muslim Americans. So we set out to find answers. We wanted to develop a vision of the prophetic mosque as a guide and a goal. And we also wanted to do empirical research on the situation. So we were guided by both of these concepts. The goal of our Reimagining Muslim Spaces project was to produce a research-driven set of recommendations for mosques that are welcoming, inclusive, and engaging, as well as a hub for hope, a source of community service. And you can read all about our findings on our website, and I'll show you the exact link in a second. So the project overview, how did we accomplish this? What did we do? We did an extensive literature review, not only on Muslim sacred spaces, but on how other religious communities have worked to engage their young people in their sacred space. We also did extensive focus groups across the country with Muslims from diverse backgrounds. We analyzed every available poll on American Muslims. We did one-on-one interviews that were in depth, and we also were able to tap into the wisdom of a diverse task force of experts. So you can get all of these resources, all of these free resources from ISPU at ispu.org RMS, which stands for Reimagining Muslim Spaces, where we offer a Reimagining Muslim Spaces toolkit to mosque leaders to be able to implement in their community. So what were our findings? And I'm only going to cover just right now, just the section of our findings on how to make mosques welcoming in general, as a whole for the whole community. And what we are hoping to also do is to have a series of webinars to explore how to make mosques more welcoming to the other subgroups that I discussed: women, young people, and new Muslims. So the first thing to understand is the makeup of our community, the profile. Who is our community? What does our community look like? The first thing to know is that the American Muslim community is the youngest faith community in America. What this means is that a full quarter of American Muslims are between the age of 18 and 24, and that's more than twice as big of a portion as any other faith community. So when you look at our community, a third or more than a third of our community is under the age of 29. It's by far the largest portion of young people of any faith community in America. So young people make up a sizable chunk of our community. And so to alienate young people is to alienate a large portion of the community. Now, young Muslims are a little different though than their peers. Unlike their peers, young Muslims are as likely as older Muslims to say that religion is important to them. Now, what you'll see here is that the light blue line here is the percentage of people who say that religion is important. And when you look at Muslims 18 to 29, 91% of young Muslims say that religion is important to them. And it's basically the same across the board. Muslims that are age 50 and above, it's 85. These numbers are basically the same statistically. But it's a very different picture in the general public, where 56% of the general public's young people say religion's important, and 81% of those who are older say religion's important. So it's a huge difference. So Muslims are unique in that young people are at least as likely as their elders to say that religion is important to them. But where Muslim young people are more similar, at least in trend, to the general public is they are less likely than their elders to say that they attend a mosque once a week or more. So 36% versus 47%. Same with young people in the general public, 22 and 44. Now, the trend isn't as extreme in the Muslim community, but it is still there. So it's not as if as it is with the general public that it's because religion just isn't as important to young people. For Muslims, there's something else that is at play, or other variables that are at play that are keeping young Muslims from attending the mosque more frequently. The Muslim community is also the most ethnically diverse community in America by far. And we are the only faith community with no majority race. No one race makes up the community. 25% of Muslims identify as Black or African American. A similar percentage identify as white, 24%. And then 18% as Asian, and then another 18% as Arab. 7% as mixed, and 5% as Hispanic, and then Native American is 1%. So Muslims are the most ethnically diverse faith community. No one race makes up the majority. And so think about that kind of inclusiveness when you're forming your mosque board, or you're thinking about who should be represented on a committee in your mosque. Half of Muslims were born in the United States and half were born outside the United States. 86% of Muslims in America are US citizens. So this is important to keep in mind, because the immigrant experience is not everybody's experience at the same time. The native born Muslims are also not everybody. And so there has to be a balance of understanding the Muslim makeup of half and half. It's literally split right down the middle. Half are immigrants and half were born in the United States. Now, this is something that a lot of people are sometimes surprised by, but Muslims are also the most likely faith community to report low income. So how are we being accommodating? How are mosques being inclusive of poor Muslims? How are our holiday celebrations, our Eid celebrations, are they inclusive of people who can't afford to spend a ton of money on a fancy Eid dinner? So these are things that we have to keep in mind. And then what programs and what services are available to the segment of our community that is up to 35% that is socioeconomically challenged. So how do we, according to the research that we did, what are some simple ways, cost-free? All of these are very simple and very easy to do. And that's why it's just a matter of the will to do it. What are some very simple, evidence-based recommendations for fostering a welcoming environment in the masjid? So when we talk to focus group participants, I'll just take a step back and explain the way we did this. Our methodology for our focus group was not to ask people, why doesn't your mosque feel welcoming? Or what are all the problems in your mosque? Okay, we weren't trying to solve a problem. We were actually approaching it through a very different lens, a very different approach. And it's a methodology called appreciative inquiry. And I recommend everyone look it up and read about it. It's a revolutionary way to transform systems that are complex. And it's different from a problem-solving model. So a problem-solving model asks, what is the problem? And then why is that problem there? And why is that problem there? And it keeps digging down into the why until it gets to what is called the root cause. And there are strengths and weaknesses to that approach. Now, the appreciative inquiry approach is very different. It says, when have you had the most positive experience in this system? When was the most positive experience that you've ever had? And then let's design so that that positive experience is repeated. What were the qualities of that positive experience? What did it smell like? What did it look like? What made it positive? And then how do we dream and design, reimagine a world and a system where that positive experience, which occurred, it's not like it was just in your imagination, it actually is something you experienced yourself. How do we amplify that? How do we multiply that so it happens more frequently? And when we ask that question of what was the best experience, the most life-giving, vibrant experience you've ever had in a masjid, here's what we heard. Over and over, people talked about being welcomed. Focus group participants agreed that the most attractive aspect of a masjid for them is the sense that they are welcome. So if you want people to come to the masjid, to want to be there, to want to invest in the masjid, this is the key. This is the secret ingredient, is to make people feel welcomed. It's not a fancy building. It's not award-winning architecture. Not a single person actually said that. It was about how that space made them feel. So to develop a sense of community and a sense of belonging, we must develop a sense that people are welcomed. So some just direct quotes from participants in the focus groups. One said, automatically I was welcomed. The smiles, the warmth, the salams, and just a sense of that it doesn't matter if you're new or you're not one of us. You are one of us because you're here. Another participant said, the thing I most loved about this mosque is the sense of generosity and hospitality, the sense of belonging. I remember one story that really struck me. A woman who said that she absolutely loved going to this one mosque. And then as she sort of talked, it became clear that the khutbah at Jum'ah, at the mosque that she just loved going to, was in a different language, a language she didn't speak. And so, you know, as a researcher, asked her, but you don't even understand what the khatib is saying. And she said, that's true. And, you know, I wish you were, I wish you would speak in English, but the people are so warm and welcoming that, that I love going there. So it was actually even more important than the content of the khutbah to her. And she would go week after week just because of how the people around her made her feel. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, you will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. So spread salam amongst yourselves. Such simple, profound, and beautiful advice. This is what everyone keeps saying in our research and in our focus groups, is that to feel a part, to feel like you belong in this communal space, to feel a part of a community, is to have people greet you. Literally, it's that simple, to spread salam amongst yourselves. How often have one of us gone into a space, whether it's a mosque or just a community gathering, and nobody speaks to us, nobody talks to us, nobody acknowledges our existence? And so this hadith is so meaningful, because it's talking about spreading salams amongst yourselves, greeting one another in the same, you know, vein as being believers. So to foster a welcoming environment, and these are simple but powerful and research-backed recommendations that you can start implementing and forming an action plan around right now, while we have this time. So we recommended forming a welcoming committee in every mosque. And this is very common in other religious spaces where there's a welcome committee for anyone who's new. And their role would be to make sure to greet people, assist people who enter the Jum'ah or other events, to actually talk to new people who are there and aren't they've never seen them before, to actually start a conversation and get to know people, to find out people's interests and expertise so they can fill volunteer spots, to sort of recruit people for different positions in the mosque to be able to pitch in and help, and then to encourage involvement in events and committees. So this is something that would not cost anyone anything except just the energy and the time of creating this kind of a committee and tasking it with this kind of with these kind of activities. Fostering a welcoming environment also means the culture in the mosque. So it's not just going to be that committee, but the whole climate, the entire ecosystem of the masjid, to develop a culture where everyone is being welcoming, to say salam to people praying next to them, to say salam to one another after Jum'ah. You know, I went to a masjid in Durham, North Carolina. It's actually the first masjid in North Carolina, the first masjid that's ever been built in North Carolina. It's right next to Duke University. I think it was called Masjid al-Rahman. No, it was another name of Allah. I'm sorry, it's escaping me right now. This was the most welcoming masjid I've ever been in my entire life. It was a very small masjid. It was predominantly African American. But the khatib actually happened to be this Southern white guy. It was a very interesting khutbah. But it was the first time in my life where every single person after Joma came up and hugged me. Literally every person that was, every woman that was there greeted me personally. And they were doing that with all of them. And it was just like a normal thing that they all did. And the men were doing the same thing. They were all personally greeting every single person that was praying. And it was like an extra like 20, 25 minutes after the salah where people were just socializing and talking and asking about each other. And it felt like a community. And it was so different from my experience in Northern Virginia, where I walk in, do my salah, and like people are rushing out before even the announcements are said. So to experience the difference, it was like I couldn't wait to go back to that masjid. I couldn't wait to go the next week and pray there, because I did, even though it was my first time, I wasn't from, I was from out of town and so forth. I was definitely made to feel like I belonged and that I was welcomed and that people were happy to see me. So when a new person comes in, give a smile and a salam. I experienced that firsthand. And if I were in that focus group, that would be the masjid that I would talk about as my best experience in a masjid. And then to instruct people on the importance of being welcoming. So to make khutbahs about this topic on being welcoming, on leadership also providing an example for this kind of approach. And as simple as it seems, you would be surprised how quickly a culture can change with just a few people doing things a little differently. So that's the end of my presentation. I want to just leave you with a couple of things. First, be on the lookout for a webinar series that will go into our research-backed recommendations for how to make mosques more inclusive and welcoming. Not only, this is a general topic of everyone, but of specifically of women, of new Muslims, and of young people. And we're creating this series in partnership with ISNA as well as Yaqeen, so that mosque leaders during this time can take this time to think about how they want the mosque to function and how they can transform it during this time off to be the most vibrant, most inclusive, most engaging mosque that they've ever had. وجزاك الله خيرا. السلام عليكم.